Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the curious tale of a lost city that vanished from the internet. You probably won't survive the journey though. Not in a literal sense, but it's the kind of story that might just leave you questioning how much of the digital world we really understand. Imagine stumbling upon a place that seemed to thrive in the early days of the internet, with a community that had formed something truly unique. Then just as quickly, it disappeared without a trace. It's as though it was swallowed up by the very digital abyss it had once flourished in. You might be asking yourself, how is that possible? A whole city just gone. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's the best way to support these late-night digital dives. Also, if you're feeling like sharing, post your location and local time down in the comments. Are you joining me for this journey from the other side of the globe? Or are you in the same time zone watching under the same stars? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The tale starts in the late 1990s, when the internet was just beginning to mature into something beyond simple text and static websites. It was the dawn of the early forum-based communities, the kind that pulled people in with the promise of shared spaces, places where anyone could create a new identity or be a part of a group they'd never meet in real life. Among these, one city stood out. It wasn't a physical place, of course. Instead, it was an online community with its own culture, history, and intrigue. Known as Virtuopolis, this digital city was a hub for creators, dreamers, and most importantly, a tightly knit community of users who didn't just connect, they thrived together. It was the place to be in its heyday, drawing people in from all corners of the globe. But before we continue, let's think about the time. The late 90s were a pivotal moment for the internet. Dial-up modems still ruled the digital landscape, and people's online identities were just beginning to form in new, exciting ways. People had websites in their AOL profiles, message boards were growing in popularity, and a sense of community was spreading. Virtuopolis wasn't just any forum. It was its own virtual world. It had forums for everything from tech discussions to philosophical debates, and a vibrant digital marketplace. The citizens of Virtuopolis were more than just users. They were architects of this strange online society. But what made it so special? Historians still argue whether the community's power came from the sheer creativity of its members, or if it was something more ephemeral, something about the digital world at that time that was truly unique. The site boasted an entirely unique feature, an open-source architecture that allowed users to build their own spaces, their own neighborhoods within the city. They could design pages, create chat rooms, and even curate cultural events, all within this ever-expanding web space. However, like any mystery worth unraveling, something changed. Without warning, the digital city began to crumble. Slowly at first, small glitches crept in. Broken links, missing images, pages loading without any content. But the most peculiar part, there was no announcement. No goodbye. One day people could access Virtuopolis and the next it was gone. A few users started posting about the issue. Some claimed it was just a server failure, while others swore they saw the warning signs coming, but no one could have predicted how abruptly it would vanish. For some, it was like losing a piece of their digital identity. The thing that still has people wondering today is, how did it happen? Why did it vanish without a trace? And why wasn't there any attempt to save it? It was the perfect blend of utopian vision and online chaos. But Virtuopolis was lost to time, slipping between the cracks of internet history, leaving nothing behind except fragmented memories of users who had long since moved on. Did it disappear on purpose? Or was it simply forgotten by those who could have saved it? The weird part, despite its disappearance, there's a part of it that never really left. People still talk about it, and scattered remnants of Virtuopolis can still be found on old websites, archived files, and forum posts. You might even find yourself stumbling upon a page or two that still carry the same digital echoes of what once was. But why is this city lost to time? Well, that's part of the mystery we're about to unravel. So sit back, relax, and let's explore the rise and fall of Virtuopolis. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find out if there's still something waiting to be discovered in the depths of the internet. In the earliest days, Virtuopolis seemed like an online paradise, a dream born from the creativity of its users. It was a vibrant, buzzing city with its own architecture and rules, its own characters and stories. But what's even more intriguing is how quickly it captured the imagination of the early internet users. This wasn't just a forum, it was a place where the line between digital and real life blurred. The city became a refuge for people from all walks of life. Tech enthusiasts, writers, artists, even people just looking to be part of something. They found solace in the anonymity of the web, where they could create a new identity, free from judgment. Now let's take a moment to think about the people who created it. Historians still debate whether Virtuopolis was truly the brainchild of a single visionary, or whether it was an organic, crowd-sourced idea that grew from the collective minds of its users. It wasn't uncommon for digital spaces back then to be started by a group of like-minded individuals, but Virtuopolis had a different vibe. While many online communities focused on niche interests, Virtuopolis was all-encompassing. The city had neighborhoods dedicated to everything from digital art to obscure literature to tech debates, and even spaces that focused purely on fun, like a virtual arcade. Users would literally walk through different areas of the city, each with its own flavor. But here's where things get interesting. The creators, if you can call them that, were both visible and invisible. On the surface, the administrators and early adopters of the site were the apparent leaders, setting the tone and curating the content. But as time went on, it became clear that the real creators were the everyday users. The more time people spent on the platform, the more invested they became in shaping the city's layout and functions. They would design new spaces and build entire communities within Virtuopolis, often without any direct oversight. It was an experiment in collaboration, and for a while it worked beautifully. However, like many digital utopias, things didn't stay perfect forever. One of the most fascinating aspects of Virtuopolis was its open-source design. Unlike modern-day platforms that rely on top-down control and corporate censorship, Virtuopolis was built on an ethos of freedom and creative autonomy. Users could tweak the site's code, create new layouts, and even add their own features. This led to some truly bizarre results. One area of the city, known as the Hacker District, was completely self-managed by its users, who added secret rooms and hidden features. Some of these areas were even locked with cryptic passwords that only a few knew. Think about that for a moment. A hidden city inside a city, built by the very people who frequented it. It was like a scavenger hunt for digital explorers, but not everyone appreciated this freedom. In fact, Virtuopolis had its fair share of controversies. Some members would argue over what direction the city should take, while others simply took things too far, hacking into parts of the site or creating malicious code. But it wasn't all bad. For every incident of digital sabotage, there was an equal amount of creativity and camaraderie. Users would collaborate to fix things and even improve them, leaving behind digital murals or unexpected puzzles that felt like Easter eggs to the initiated. Yet, there was one issue that seemed to grow as the city expanded: the upkeep. With such an open platform, the maintenance of the city became increasingly difficult. The bigger it got, the more scattered and unwieldy it became. Just like in any real-world city, when you're dealing with a population of highly engaged and creative individuals, things start to fall through the cracks. Pages would go missing, links would break, and some of the grander features of the city started to show their age. Historians still argue whether Virtuopolis could have sustained itself had it not been for these growing pains, or whether it was simply destined to burn out due to its own success. It's worth noting, though, that the cracks were subtle at first. There were no red flags, no "this is the end" moments, just slow, gradual shifts that users didn't initially notice. Small things like pages not loading properly, or certain forums becoming inactive, didn't seem like much at the time. But soon enough there were whispers. Users began noticing these changes, and the once thriving city started to feel eerily quiet. Despite these early signs, Virtuopolis was still a hub for digital interaction and creativity. People made friends, shared stories, and created their own corners of the internet. The magic of it all was that, no matter where you were in the world, if you were a member of Virtuopolis, you were part of something bigger. But this was only the beginning of the story. As we dive deeper, we'll uncover the first major signs of decay. Glitches that hinted at something more ominous, the kind of issues that could only signal a deeper problem at the core of Virtuopolis. Hold on tight. We're just getting started. As the digital landscape of Virtuopolis grew, so did the complexities of managing it. What started as a whimsical, carefree creation, a city built on the free flow of ideas and collaboration, soon began to show signs of strain. The initial cracks in its infrastructure weren't all that noticeable, but those who had been around from the beginning could sense something was off. Imagine living in a vibrant city, and one day you walk down a familiar street only to find a store has shut down. At first it's a small change and you brush it off, but after a while more shops close and your favorite hangout spot becomes eerily empty. That was the feeling that many of Virtuopolis's longtime users began to experience. The first major sign of decay came in the form of glitches. At first they were harmless, a broken image here, a missing link there, but as time went on the glitches became more pronounced. Pages would load incomplete, and forums that had once been bustling with activity were left abandoned. The feeling of Virtuopolis slowly unraveling grew, and it wasn't long before users started speculating about what was causing the decline. Was it a server issue? Or was something more sinister at play? Historians still argue whether Virtuopolis's downfall was a result of external factors, like a lack of investment and resources, or if the users themselves inadvertently pushed it to the brink. It's easy to point the finger at the hackers and troublemakers who had always existed on the fringes of the community, but Virtuopolis was something different. The site wasn't just a forum or a chat room, it was a living, breathing digital city. And like any city, it had its own set of dynamics. As new users flooded in, some of the older members, the ones who had built Virtuopolis from the ground up, began to feel like outsiders in their own creation. This shift in the community's atmosphere led to fragmentation, with people clustering into subgroups, each focusing on their own interests or ideas of what Virtuopolis should be. This, of course, wasn't all bad. As the city began to fragment, new subcultures formed within it. Entire sections of the city were reborn as niche communities, with their own inside jokes, art, and way of life. One such area was the Hacker District, a place where users could test out wild ideas, crack codes, and engage in challenges with one another. It was a playground for digital explorers, and for a while it thrived. But even here, things started to feel off. As glitches began to increase, the Hacker District's wild experimentation began to show darker results. Hidden pages were added that no one could access, and some users began to suspect that there was something wrong with the city's code, a flaw that couldn't be fixed. But even with all the chaos, the spirit of Virtuopolis persisted. At least for a while. In the midst of all this, the city's creators, if you could call them that, were becoming harder to find. The early leaders who had once shaped the city's design began to vanish from the site. They weren't leaving per se. They just stopped showing up. Some claimed it was burnout, while others thought they had moved on to other projects. Whatever the reason, Virtuopolis's founding figures began to fade into the background, leaving the site to be managed by the users themselves. At first, this was seen as an opportunity. Users were free to run the city how they saw fit, with little interference from the original architects. But as the cracks widened, it became clear that without the leadership that had guided Virtuopolis through its prime, the site was becoming a chaotic collection of disconnected spaces. But this didn't stop people from trying to preserve it. While some just accepted the decline, others, digital archaeologists of sorts, began scouring the remnants of Virtuopolis, searching for clues as to what had gone wrong. They dug through old files, archived pages, and even the scattered memories of users who had once been part of the community. What they found were strange anomalies, like sections of the city that no one could recall ever visiting, or links that led to nowhere. For these digital historians, Virtuopolis had become a mystery to be solved, a puzzle that needed to be pieced together, even if it could never be fully restored. One thing became clear as these digital archaeologists sifted through the ruins of Virtuopolis. No one really knew how it ended. The site didn't just go offline like so many others before it. There were no warnings, no final goodbyes. It simply vanished. The domain name expired, and the site's files went dark, leaving nothing behind but empty space and memories. Was it truly erased, or did something more mysterious happen to it? Some still argue that there was a secret purge, a purposeful deletion, while others believe it was a technical failure beyond anyone's control. Whatever the case, Virtuopolis became the digital equivalent of a lost city, a place that, for a time, had been a shining example of the internet's potential. It was a space where people could come together, create and build something meaningful. And yet it disappeared, leaving only fragmented stories and half-finished archives in its wake. As we continue on this journey, we'll explore the first signs of its disappearance, the glitches and gaps that slowly chipped away at the city's foundation. But we'll also take a deeper look at the theories that have surfaced in the years since, asking the question, what really happened to Virtuopolis? As we move deeper into the mystery of Virtuopolis, the story starts to take on a more eerie tone. The glitches, those subtle disruptions in the digital landscape, weren't just harmless errors anymore. They were symptoms of something much larger, something that had been quietly eroding the city from the inside out. The first signs of decay were small, almost insignificant. A missing image here, a forum post that didn't load correctly there. But as time went on, these issues became harder to ignore. Pages failed to load entirely. Links redirected users to strange, empty places, and most unsettling of all, the familiar faces of the city's creators and longtime users began to disappear. It was as if the digital city was beginning to lose its residents, one by one, until only the remnants of the community remained. Some users began speculating that the glitches were simply technical issues, easily fixed with a few lines of code. Others, however, began to wonder if something more sinister was at play. Was there a deliberate attack on the city? Or was the city itself slowly imploding under the weight of its own ambition? Historians still argue whether the glitches were simply the result of Virtuopolis's rapid growth, or if they were the inevitable result of an open-source platform without proper oversight. Some believe that the city's unique architecture, The ability for anyone to contribute and change the design was its downfall. It was a place built on the very principle of freedom, and while that fostered creativity, it also led to chaos. Over time, the city became too large to manage, and no one person or group had the power to fix it. Virtuopolis's very nature was its own undoing, and yet the glitches didn't fully explain the city's slow disappearance. There were other signs, more unsettling ones. Rumors began circulating that parts of Virtuopolis had been deliberately erased. Some claimed that an unknown force was systematically deleting pages, forums, and entire sections of the city, like a digital purging. But who would do such a thing, and why? Was there a group within the community who had decided that Virtuopolis had outlived its purpose? Or was there a more powerful entity pulling the strings? One theory that gained traction was that the creators of Virtuopolis, those elusive figures who had originally built the city, had decided to pull the plug themselves. Perhaps they had grown tired of managing such a sprawling, chaotic digital world. Maybe they realized that the city had outgrown them, that the original dream had become too fragmented and uncontrollable. Some whispered that they had made a conscious decision to erase Virtuopolis from the internet, a way of reclaiming the digital space they had once helped create. Others speculated that the creators had been forced to shut it down, either due to legal pressure or some kind of corporate interference. The truth, however, remains elusive. As the glitches became more frequent, the users of Virtuopolis began to take action. They tried everything they could think of to salvage what was left of the city. Digital archaeologists, enthusiasts, and former members began searching for remnants of the city in the corners of the internet. They scoured archives, dug through old backups, and even attempted to recreate Virtuopolis in other forms. Copycat sites and fan-made versions of the city began to pop up. But no matter how hard they tried, none of them could fully capture the magic that had once made Virtuopolis so unique. Each attempt at revival fell short, like trying to recreate a memory that had already faded. But the most chilling part of all this was the way Virtuopolis was erased. It wasn't just a slow, gradual process. It was as if the city had been deleted without warning. The domain name expired, the servers went dark, and the once thriving forums were reduced to empty pages. There were no final goodbyes, no explanations. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and turned the city off. The eerie silence that followed was deafening. Where had it gone? What had happened to it? The community was left in the dark, with nothing but the fragments of their memories to hold on to. As the dust settled, a strange sense of nostalgia began to grow among the former residents of Virtuopolis. It was as though the city had never really disappeared. People still talked about it, reminiscing about the good times they had shared there. Virtuopolis had left an indelible mark on the internet's early history, and its disappearance only added to the mystery surrounding it. Could it ever be fully resurrected? Or was the city destined to remain a ghost, a haunting memory of a time when the internet felt like a limitless space of possibility? But here's the thing. Virtuopolis wasn't entirely gone. Fragments of the city lingered in forgotten corners of the web, pieces of code scattered across old servers, archived forum posts still accessible through digital time capsules. Some users even claim to have visited these remnants, finding old pages that seemed frozen in time. Were these truly the last remnants of Virtuopolis? Or was there more to the story? Something hidden waiting to be discovered? As we continue our exploration, we'll dive into the most compelling theories surrounding Virtuopolis's disappearance. Was it a digital attack, an intentional deletion, or simply the inevitable collapse of a once great city? And perhaps, just maybe, we'll uncover a piece of the puzzle that no one has found before. As the digital dust began to settle, the theories surrounding Virtuopolis's disappearance continued to grow. becoming more complex and mysterious by the day. At first, it was easy to believe that the glitches, the slow breakdowns, and the missing links were simply signs of technical failure. After all, the internet back in the late 90s and early 2000s was still a relatively new frontier. Servers went down, sites experienced issues, and many online communities struggled to keep up with their own growth. But Virtuopolis wasn't just any other website. It was something unique, something larger than life in its heyday. And so, as the glitches turned into full-scale disappearance, the internet community began to search for other explanations. Historians and tech enthusiasts alike started digging through archives, trying to uncover the truth about what had happened. Some believed the city was purposely deleted, a sort of digital purging of the past. Was it the creators' decision to shut it down, or was there another force at play? Could there have been legal or corporate pressures that led to Virtuopolis's sudden and mysterious exit from the digital stage? The answers were as elusive as the site itself, but a few compelling theories began to take shape. One of the most popular theories suggested that Virtuopolis had become a target of censorship. As the city grew, it attracted all kinds of users, some with darker intentions. The city's open architecture allowed for an influx of digital trespassers, hackers, spammers, and malicious users who slowly began to infiltrate the system. Was this the beginning of its downfall? Could it be that the site's openness and lack of control over its users made it vulnerable to exploitation? Some believed that a coalition of concerned individuals or organizations had decided to purge Virtuopolis to prevent the spread of dangerous or illegal content. A digital cleanup, if you will. Yet even this theory didn't sit well with everyone. There were still many who believed that the disappearance of Virtuopolis was not a matter of censorship, but rather the result of its own success. As the city grew, it became a sprawling, uncontrollable entity. Historians still argue whether Virtuopolis could have sustained itself in the long run. The community had expanded so much, with so many subcultures and new digital spaces being built, that it was no longer a manageable place. The creators may have simply thrown in the towel, realizing that the digital city they had once crafted with so much care had grown beyond their ability to maintain it. But this theory begs a question. If the creators had truly given up, why didn't they announce it? Why wasn't there a final goodbye? Why were users left to discover that the city they loved had disappeared without a word? The absence of closure is what makes Virtuopolis's disappearance so unsettling. It wasn't like a regular website shutting down due to financial issues or a server malfunction. It was something far stranger. Some users began to speculate that there had been a hidden agenda behind Virtuopolis's erasure, something much darker than just a city gone bad. Was there an intentional effort to erase the site from the internet's collective memory? After all, Virtuopolis wasn't just any ordinary community. It was a place where people lived out their digital lives. The city wasn't built on a typical server structure. It was an intricate system of databases, pages, and subforums, constantly evolving. In the eyes of some, it had become more than a website. It had become a digital ecosystem, an experiment in online social structure. Could it be that this ecosystem became too much of a risk? Was it deleted for reasons we still don't understand? And then there were the conspiracy theories. Some of the more wild ideas suggested that Virtuopolis's disappearance was linked to larger internet trends of the time. Could it have been a part of the digital purge that occurred as the internet began to be commercialized and regulated? In the late 90s and early 2000s, the internet was a wild west, open and free but with little oversight. As the years went on, however, the landscape began to change. Corporate interests, government regulations, and the rise of the social media giants slowly started to dominate the web. Was Virtuopolis just a casualty of this shift? Some people believed that the site's creators, or the powers behind the digital curtain, had decided to erase Virtuopolis before it became a threat to the more commercialized, controlled version of the internet that was emerging. A preemptive strike to make sure that these independent digital spaces didn't gain too much traction. But despite the many theories, no one could ever really know what happened to Virtuopolis. The digital traces it left behind were incomplete, fragmented, and often contradictory. There were remnants of the site in obscure corners of the internet, hidden in archived websites, forgotten backups, and bits of code that users had managed to rescue from the wreckage. But these fragments were far from enough to piece the full story together. Many of the most important files and databases had disappeared along with the site, leaving only ghostly remnants behind. In the years since its disappearance, Virtuopolis has become a myth. People still tell stories about it, recounting their experiences and speculating about what might have happened. Some even claim to have seen the site's ghostly traces, lingering on the edges of the internet, waiting to be rediscovered. But the truth, as is often the case with internet legends, is likely lost to time. Perhaps it's for the best. After all, some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, their pieces scattered across the digital landscape for us to stumble upon in fleeting moments. As we near the end of our journey through the rise and fall of Virtuopolis, the one thing that remains certain is this. The city may be gone, but its story hasn't been forgotten. It remains a part of internet lore, a curious chapter in the history of digital communities that will never truly fade away. So even though the city has vanished, perhaps it's only a matter of time before someone finds the missing piece that brings it back in one form or another. The more time that passed since the disappearance of Virtuopolis, the more the mystery began to solidify into something akin to urban legend. The site's sudden and unexplained shutdown sparked a wave of digital archaeology, a term coined by the very users who had once been part of the thriving city. These digital archaeologists were more than just nostalgic fans. They were determined to uncover the truth about what had happened. They sifted through the fragmented archives of the internet, tracking down old server backups, poking through dusty corners of long-forgotten websites, and piecing together stories from the few remaining members of the community who hadn't moved on. In the quiet corners of the internet, whispers about Virtuopolis never fully stopped. The myths grew over time, each new retelling adding a new layer of mystery, a new piece to the puzzle that no one could quite solve. Some stories suggested that the city had been shut down by its creators themselves, weary of the growing chaos and the impossible task of managing a sprawling, self-made digital empire. Others, more dramatic tales, claimed that the city had been purposefully erased by forces beyond the creators' control, maybe even larger entities like tech corporations or government agencies that wanted to stifle the independent, anarchic digital world that Virtuopolis had come to represent. Historians still argue whether it was the natural result of a project growing too big to sustain, or whether there was a deliberate decision to pull the plug, either for reasons of control or necessity. Could Virtuopolis have been destroyed by something as simple as a server failure, or was there something darker at play? Some users still swear they felt the rise of an underlying conspiracy, an idea that seemed far-fetched at first, but as more theories emerged, it began to take hold. If Virtuopolis wasn't simply forgotten by the people who had created it, then could it have been buried? And if so, why? Even after all these years, one thing remains certain. Despite its disappearance, Virtuopolis continues to inspire curiosity, and it remains one of the most talked-about digital mysteries of its time. Its story has survived in whispers, in bits of old chat logs and forum posts, in scattered memories and cryptic references. The city might be gone, But the idea of Virtuopolis, the ideal of it, still lingers. While many of the users moved on to new communities, new projects, or even different parts of the internet entirely, Virtuopolis left a lasting impression on its residents. And so as time went on, the legend of the city evolved. It became a symbol of the early idealistic days of the internet, a time when anything seemed possible. Before the age of social media giants, before corporate-controlled digital spaces, Virtuopolis was a place where people could truly make something their own. It was a reminder of what the internet used to be, open, free, and full of potential. But despite the nostalgia that surrounded it, the real question that lingered in the minds of digital historians and former residents was, why did it disappear so completely? Theories continued to swirl, but no one could say for sure. Some believed that the digital city had been forgotten by its creators, but others speculated that Virtuopolis had outlived its usefulness. Once the internet started becoming more commercialized, once larger platforms began to dominate, the ideals of a free, creative space like Virtuopolis might have become an anachronism. Maybe the city had simply been left behind in the rush of progress, doomed to be forgotten as newer, shinier platforms took its place. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Some people, and this is where the mystery deepens, claim that there's more to the story. Could it be that there's something we still don't know about Virtuopolis? Hidden in the forgotten corners of the internet, could there still be a piece of the city, a page, a file, or a server that holds the key to understanding what happened? There have been claims that some users have found old files, stray pieces of code or remnants of old pages, that suggest Virtuopolis might not be entirely gone after all. Could there be a fragment of it still out there waiting to be uncovered? A lost city, buried deep within the folds of the internet's early history? And it's not just the fans of Virtuopolis who are still searching. Digital preservationists, archivists, and even tech companies are beginning to show an interest in recovering lost internet spaces. The idea of digital preservation is becoming more important as time goes on. And as technology advances, it becomes more possible to access archives that were once thought to be lost forever. The hunt for Virtuopolis is part of this broader movement, a movement to preserve the earliest days of the internet before they fade completely into oblivion. But perhaps the most fascinating part of this story is that the very idea of Virtuopolis, its unique sense of community, its quirky open-source nature, and its belief in the free flow of creativity, still exists in other parts of the internet today. The digital world has changed, and Virtuopolis may no longer have a place, but the ideals it represented still find their way into new online spaces. Platforms like Reddit, Discord, and even some open-source projects embody the spirit of what Virtuopolis once was. The city may have vanished, but its ethos lives on in the far corners of the web, so the question remains, was the disappearance of Virtuopolis just a natural evolution of the internet, or was it something more deliberate? Was it erased, or did it simply fade away as the world moved on? The mystery of Virtuopolis may never be solved, but it continues to live on as a reminder of the early, experimental days of the internet. Days when anything seemed possible, and a digital city could rise and fall, all within the span of a few short years. As we continue to unravel the mystery of Virtuopolis, it's impossible not to acknowledge the lasting legacy the city left on the internet. Its existence may have been brief, but its impact stretched far beyond its time, influencing the way online communities are built and interacted with. Although it vanished without a trace, its story is one that continues to inspire curiosity, especially among those who were there when it flourished. While some have moved on, Virtuopolis remains alive in the stories of those who once called it home. These stories, fragmented as they are, offer a unique window into what the early internet was like, a time when the web felt like a vast, untamed frontier. Before algorithms and commercialized content began to dominate the space, people were free to create and interact without fear of being silenced or censored. Virtuopolis was one of the last vestiges of that free-spirited online age, a time when digital spaces were shaped by the people who inhabited them, not corporations or advertisers. What's fascinating is that Virtuopolis had been a symbol of what the internet could have been, and to a certain extent still is in some spaces today. While mainstream social platforms like Facebook and Twitter have become increasingly commercialized, platforms like Reddit and Discord continue to offer that same sense of creative freedom. These spaces, much like Virtuopolis, are filled with users who curate content, share stories, and create digital communities. Even though these platforms are far more structured and heavily moderated, the spirit of Virtuopolis still lives on in them. But there's a paradox here, isn't there? On one hand, the disappearance of Virtuopolis seems like the inevitable result of the internet's evolution. The more successful a digital community becomes, the harder it is to maintain. As the community grows, so too do the problems: server overload, user conflicts, and the constant need for moderation. Yet on the other hand, Virtuopolis also represents something else. A time when the internet felt like a playground, a place where anything was possible. And in a way, that sense of possibility still lingers in the far reaches of the web. Despite all of this, some people still hold on to the hope that Virtuopolis can be found, or at least its spirit can be revived. Digital explorers and enthusiasts continue to search for hidden remnants of the city, combing through forgotten servers and archived forums. Some of these explorers claim to have found tiny fragments of the city, pages that seem like they shouldn't exist anymore, pieces of code that should have been deleted years ago. But these remnants are just that, fragments. Virtuopolis, as a cohesive whole, is gone. All that remains are whispers and rumors, memories of a time when the internet was a different place. And so the search for the city continues. The mystery of Virtuopolis has become a digital legend, much like the lost cities of the physical world. In a way, it's become a symbol of what we've lost as the internet has evolved. We no longer live in a world where anyone can create something like Virtuopolis, a place that feels like it belongs to its users. Instead, we live in a digital age where platforms are controlled by a handful of corporations, where the freedom to create is often limited by rules, algorithms, and monetization. There's a lesson to be learned here, though. The loss of Virtuopolis is a reminder of how fragile the digital world can be. It's easy to take for granted the vast and open spaces that we have access to today, but history has shown us that digital spaces can disappear in the blink of an eye. Whether due to corporate interests, government interference, or simply the passage of time, we may one day look back at the internet of today and realize that we were living in an era of freedom that will never come again. And perhaps that's why Virtuopolis still holds such a powerful place in the hearts of its former residents. It represents a golden age of the internet, a time when anything seemed possible. Its sudden disappearance was a harsh reminder that nothing, whether physical or digital, is permanent. The internet is an ever-changing landscape, and in the blink of an eye, something that once felt like it would last forever can fade into the past. So what do we take away from this story? Maybe it's a reminder to appreciate the spaces we still have and to be mindful of the communities we create. In a world where digital empires rise and fall, it's easy to forget that the heart of the internet lies in the people who use it. As we move forward, we should strive to keep the spirit of Virtuopolis alive in the spaces we inhabit, creating communities that are open, creative, and free from the constraints of corporate control. The story of Virtuopolis may have ended, but its lessons live on. In the forgotten corners of the internet, in the stories shared by those who were once part of its digital city, and in the hope that one day someone might uncover the missing pieces of the puzzle, Virtuopolis continues to haunt the digital landscape. It's a ghost of the past, but it's a ghost that refuses to be forgotten. The more we delve into the tale of Virtuopolis, the clearer it becomes that its story is not just about a digital city that disappeared, it's about the ever-evolving nature of the internet itself. Virtuopolis represents an earlier era, a time when the internet felt like a sprawling, boundless space, open to all who dared to explore. It was a time when the web was still an unknown frontier, and the rules of engagement weren't written in corporate handbooks or by governments, but by the very people who inhabited these digital spaces. The fall of Virtuopolis is a reminder of how quickly things change in the digital world, and how easily the open, free-form nature of the internet can be compromised by external forces. It's also important to note that the disappearance of Virtuopolis wasn't just a technical issue, it was a cultural shift. Back in the day when Virtuopolis was at its height, the internet was a place for exploration, for creativity, and for experimentation. It was a place where people could truly create something from nothing. People could design websites, build communities, and invent new ways of interacting with each other. It wasn't about likes or followers, but about sharing knowledge, telling stories, and forming connections. Fast forward to today, and the internet looks very different. Social media platforms dominate, and content creation has been overtaken by algorithms that determine what we see and when we see it. The corporate model has taken over, and the free-flowing creativity that Virtuopolis once embodied has been replaced by a more controlled, monetized system. But that's not to say the spirit of Virtuopolis is entirely gone. In fact, remnants of its idealism can still be found in small corners of the internet. One of the most remarkable things about Virtuopolis was how its users, despite the growing fragmentation and the glitches that started to tear it apart, still managed to hold on to that sense of creative freedom. They didn't just accept the changes happening around them, they fought for what they believed was the true essence of Virtuopolis. The digital archaeologists and preservationists who continue to search for the lost city are doing so not only because they want to find it, but because they want to understand what made it so special. Virtuopolis was more than a place, it was a concept, a manifestation of the internet's potential. But even as we look back with fondness at the ideals that Virtuopolis represented, we must also acknowledge the darker side of the digital revolution. The very things that made Virtuopolis such a vibrant creative space, its open-source nature, its reliance on user-generated content, and its freedom from centralized control, also made it vulnerable. The city's creators, despite their best efforts, could not foresee the challenges that would arise as Virtuopolis grew. What began as an organic community soon became a sprawling, decentralized ecosystem that was difficult to maintain and nearly impossible to regulate. As more users joined, the very thing that made the city unique, the freedom and creativity of its people, became the catalyst for its downfall. We also can't ignore the role of the digital landscape itself. The internet has always been a living, breathing organism. It evolves constantly, and often in ways that aren't immediately apparent. Virtuopolis may have been a casualty of this evolution, a victim of the rapid commercialization and consolidation that started to take hold of the internet in the early 2000s. In the rush to create profit-driven platforms, we lost a lot of the untamed experimental spaces that once defined the internet. In many ways, Virtuopolis represents the last breath of the internet's early spirit, before it was shaped by corporate interests and marketing algorithms. What's even more striking, however, is how much we still value those early days of the internet, even as we live in a very different digital age. There's a sense of nostalgia that surrounds Virtuopolis, but also a sense of loss. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of all is that we never truly understood how important Virtuopolis was until it was gone. It's only in retrospect that we realize how much it symbolized. A time when the internet was a place of endless possibility, a place where people could make their mark without having to conform to corporate standards or social media algorithms. And yet, even as we mourn its loss, we can't help but be inspired by its story. Virtuopolis was a testament to the power of community and the creative spirit of the early internet. It was proof that, in the right hands, the digital world can be a place of boundless imagination and freedom. While it may have disappeared into the ether, its legacy lives on in the digital spaces we still inhabit today. The idealism that once defined Virtuopolis has been passed on to newer generations of internet users who, while facing new challenges, continue to push the boundaries of what the internet can be. It's fitting, in a way, that Virtuopolis lives on in this form, a mystery, a legend, a story that continues to be told long after its physical form has vanished. The city may be gone, but the ideas behind it, the community it fostered, and the creativity it inspired are still very much alive. In that sense, Virtuopolis hasn't truly disappeared. It's simply evolved into something different, something that exists in the hearts and minds of those who remember it. As we look ahead, we may find that the story of Virtuopolis is not one of loss, but of transformation. The digital world continues to evolve, and who knows, perhaps one day a new city, born from the spirit of Virtuopolis, will rise again. Until then, we'll hold on to the memories of the digital city that once was, and remember that in the world of the internet, nothing is ever truly lost. By now you might be wondering, does Virtuopolis even matter anymore? After all, that was a world long before the slick, corporate-controlled platforms we navigate today. Yet the more we reflect on Virtuopolis and its disappearance, the more we realize that the lessons it imparted are more relevant than ever. It wasn't just about the rise and fall of a digital city. It was about the potential for online spaces to be more than what we've come to accept today. It was about creative freedom, community, and the spirit of exploration. What makes the story of Virtuopolis so captivating isn't just the mystery of how it disappeared, but what it represented. It stood as a beacon of what the early internet could have been, a place where anyone, from anywhere in the world, could create, share, and thrive without the constant watchful eye of corporate influence. It was a symbol of the internet as a frontier of endless possibilities, and that's why its loss stings so much. In a way, the disappearance of Virtuopolis was the moment the internet lost its innocence, at least for those who were there to witness it. But perhaps we're getting a bit melancholic here, because let's face it, Virtuopolis wasn't perfect. It had its flaws, just like any growing city. The more users it gained, the more problems arose. The utopia that some had dreamed of turned into a sprawling, disorganized space that, while still full of creativity, lacked the infrastructure to support its own growth. The glitches and disappearing links were a foreshadowing of its downfall, but they also highlighted the need for better digital systems that could sustain the creativity and community that Virtuopolis had fostered. But without the chaos, even so, it's hard not to look back and feel a sense of awe at what Virtuopolis achieved. It wasn't just a digital space, it was a movement. It was a community built on the idea that anyone, anywhere could create and contribute. It was the purest form of the internet's potential, before the rise of the social media giants that today dominate the digital landscape. In a sense, Virtuopolis was the last stand of the open. Free internet. The internet that allowed people to truly feel like they were part of something bigger than themselves. As we've explored the city's rise and fall, the most intriguing question that remains is, what can we learn from its story? We live in a world where the internet is increasingly shaped by algorithms and profit motives, where our online identities are controlled by corporations that own the platforms we use. The dream of a free and open internet is becoming more and more distant with each passing year. And yet Virtuopolis reminds us that it doesn't have to be this way. It shows us that a digital space built on creativity, collaboration and freedom can thrive, at least for a time. But the tragedy of Virtuopolis is that it couldn't sustain itself. The very ideals that made it so vibrant, freedom, open collaboration and user-driven creation, became its undoing. The city's downfall was the result of growing pains, yes, but also a reminder that the internet is fragile. It's a place that can be lost in an instant, swept away by the very forces that created it. As we look at the internet of today, we can't help but wonder, could we bring something like Virtuopolis back? Could we recreate that sense of digital freedom? That ability to create something new and meaningful without the pressure of commercialization and profit. The challenge today is greater than it was in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The internet has become a complex, layered environment where creators are often at the mercy of algorithms and corporate interests. But maybe, just maybe, there's room for Virtuopolis style creativity to resurface in the modern world. Perhaps the true legacy of Virtuopolis is that it serves as a blueprint for what the internet could be, a place for boundless creativity and unfettered connection, where the rules aren't written by advertisers or tech giants, but by the people who inhabit it. The digital city that once thrived might be gone, but the principles it was built on still resonate with those who remember it. The idea that the internet can be a place of genuine community, where creativity and collaboration aren't stifled, is still alive even if it's harder to find today. In a way, the mystery of Virtuopolis is one that will never be fully solved. It's a digital enigma, locked away in the archives of the internet, with only fragments of its story remaining. But that doesn't mean its influence has disappeared. Virtuopolis will live on, not just in the stories of those who were there, but in the quest for a better, freer internet. One where communities can thrive, creators can build, and the spirit of possibility is never fully extinguished. And as we close tonight's journey, maybe we can take something away from it. Virtuopolis wasn't just about a lost city. It was about the potential we all have to shape the digital world around us. As the internet continues to evolve, let's remember that the real power lies not in the corporations or algorithms that try to control it, but in the creativity, freedom, and connection that we, the users, can create together. Virtuopolis may be gone, but the idea of it, the spirit of it, lives on in each of us. In every new digital community we help build, and every space we create in the vast digital world. The city's story might be over, but the quest for freedom on the internet is far from finished. As we near the end of our exploration, we can't help but feel the weight of what Virtuopolis represents in the broader story of the internet. It was in many ways a metaphor for what could have been, and in some ways still could be. But its disappearance, as sudden and complete as it was, is a reminder of how fleeting things can be in the digital world. Just like that, an entire city, an entire community vanished, leaving behind only fragmented memories and ghostly traces scattered across the web. But here's where things get interesting. The story of Virtuopolis isn't just about nostalgia. It's not just about a lost digital city that we can never visit again. It's about what happens when digital spaces are built with no limits, when the internet is used to its fullest potential as a canvas for creativity, collaboration, and self-expression. In the case of Virtuopolis, its downfall was a result of the very thing that made it so unique, its open nature. But that open nature wasn't a flaw. It was what made it special. It was a place where the boundaries between creator and user, between architect and resident, were blurred. Virtuopolis wasn't just a site. It was a living, breathing city where everyone could leave their mark. So when Virtuopolis vanished, it wasn't just the end of a website. It was the end of an era. The early internet, the internet of the 90s and early 2000s, was a place where users weren't just passive consumers of content, they were active creators. Whether it was designing their own websites, writing blogs, or contributing to online communities, users shaped the digital landscape. But somewhere along the way, that sense of freedom began to fade. As the internet became more commercialized, as platforms grew larger and more centralized, the ability for users to truly own their digital spaces diminished. Virtuopolis was a glimpse into what could have been, a place where the digital world was free, creative, and driven by the people who lived in it. But that sense of freedom didn't disappear with Virtuopolis. It evolved into something different. Today we still see the remnants of that spirit in spaces like Reddit, Discord, and even niche forums that continue to thrive. These platforms might not be as open as Virtuopolis was, but they still carry with them the idea that the internet is a place for creativity and collaboration. They are the descendants of Virtuopolis, carrying the torch of its ideals into the future. Yet as we look at these modern platforms, there's a feeling of something missing. They may be bustling hubs of activity, but they often come with limitations. Algorithms dictate what we see, and content creation is often driven by likes, views, and followers. The corporate interests behind these platforms shape the conversations and the communities that form within them. The open, free-spirited nature of Virtuopolis has been replaced by a more structured, controlled experience. But the desire for a truly open internet is still there, quietly bubbling beneath the surface. Could we ever return to the ideals that Virtuopolis represented? Is it possible to recreate that digital utopia? A space where anyone can create and share without fear of censorship or commercialization. The truth is, we might not be able to bring back Virtuopolis as it was, but we can certainly build new digital spaces that echo its principles. The key, however, is understanding the lessons it left behind. Virtuopolis taught us that the internet can be a place of boundless creativity and freedom, but it also showed us that without the right structure, that freedom can lead to chaos. It was a digital city without a clear governance model, where anyone could come and contribute, but where nobody was fully in control. This led to its downfall, but it also provided us with a valuable lesson about the importance of balance between openness and structure. In the modern internet, we need to find ways to foster creativity while still providing a sense of stability and order. But even as we strive to create new digital spaces that reflect the ideals of Virtuopolis, it's important to recognize that the landscape has changed. The internet is no longer the wild, untamed frontier it once was. It's a space that is heavily influenced by corporations, governments, and powerful algorithms. The question we face today is how to reclaim the spirit of Virtuopolis in a world that is increasingly dominated by corporate interests and surveillance capitalism. Can we find a way to recreate that sense of freedom and creativity without falling into the traps of the current system? This is where the digital preservationists come in. They are the modern-day archaeologists, digging through the remnants of the past and trying to bring back what was lost. They are the ones who scour the archives for old websites, old forums, and even forgotten code in hopes of preserving the early days of the internet. These efforts are not just about nostalgia. They are about reclaiming a piece of history and understanding how the internet became what it is today. By studying the rise and fall of Virtuopolis, they hope to learn from the past and build a better future for the internet. As we look back on the tale of Virtuopolis, one thing becomes clear. Its story is not over. It lives on in the lessons it taught us, and in the communities that continue to thrive in the spirit of creativity and freedom. The digital world may have changed, but the desire for open, unrestricted spaces remains. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, we'll see a new Virtuopolis rise from the ashes, carrying with it the ideals of its predecessor, ready to shape the next chapter of the Internet's story. At this point in our journey, it's hard to ignore the sense of loss that still lingers in the digital air. Virtuopolis may have vanished, but the feeling it left behind continues to reverberate through the corners of the Internet. When we talk about the early days of the web, it's impossible not to mention Virtuopolis. It was more than just a site. It was an experiment, a living, breathing digital space that embodied the ideals of what the Internet could have been. The very things that made it so magical, its openness, its creative freedom, its sense of community, are the very things we yearn for today. Yet they seem harder and harder to find. Despite this, there's a comforting thought in knowing that the spirit of Virtuopolis never fully disappeared. It didn't vanish entirely. Instead, it transformed, carried forward in the communities and digital spaces that still exist today, albeit in a more controlled and structured form. Platforms like Reddit and Discord, as much as they are bound by rules and algorithms, still contain the heart of Virtuopolis, a place where people can come together, share ideas, and create something meaningful. These spaces, though far more commercialized and regulated than Virtuopolis, continue to echo its ideals, proving that the hunger for open, creative spaces is not a thing of the past. The question we're left with, however, is this: what happens when those ideals are lost in the tide of commercialization? What happens when the freedom that defined Virtuopolis gives way to monetized platforms and corporate influence? Virtuopolis was built on the belief that the Internet should be a place of possibility, where users aren't just passive consumers of content, but active creators. The commercial Internet we live in today is a far cry from that dream. We've traded boundless creativity for streamlined experiences, and while that's allowed the Internet to evolve in many ways, it's also made it harder for new ideas to flourish without the weight of commercial interests hanging over them. One of the most disheartening truths about the disappearance of Virtuopolis is that, in some ways, it marked the death of the open Internet. At least the open Internet we once knew. We now live in a world where everything is curated, controlled, and optimized for profit. It's not about community anymore. It's about engagement. Content creators are constantly trying to beat the algorithm to get more clicks, more likes, more shares. The very nature of creation has become intertwined with the need for validation and monetization. And it's in this environment that we often find ourselves yearning for the days when the Internet felt like a blank canvas, ready to be filled with whatever we could dream up. That doesn't mean we've lost hope. There are still spaces on the web where creativity thrives, even if they're harder to find. Small niche communities still exist, where people can be their authentic selves without the pressure to perform for the algorithm. These are the new Virtuopolis-esque spaces, digital havens where people connect and create, without the fear of being swallowed up by the corporate machine. They may not be as visible or as widespread as the platforms that dominate our online lives today, but they represent something important: the resilience of the ideals that Virtuopolis stood for. In a sense, we've all become digital archaeologists, searching for remnants of that lost city, piecing together fragments of the Internet's past, and trying to bring back the pieces that still resonate with us. And perhaps in doing so, we're also helping to create new spaces that embody the same ideals. In the quiet corners of the Internet, where algorithms don't rule the roost, creativity still flourishes. Whether it's a small forum for writers or a niche Discord server where digital artists share their work, the spirit of Virtuopolis lives on. But there's also something bittersweet about this. It's as though we're trying to recreate something that's already gone, even though we can't fully capture it, and maybe we shouldn't try to recreate it exactly. Maybe the goal is not to bring back Virtuopolis itself, but to bring its ideals into the future, adapting them to the world we live in now. After all, the internet continues to evolve, and with it our ideas about what it should be. What was possible in the early days of the web isn't necessarily possible now. But that doesn't mean we can't carve out new spaces that reflect the same creativity, the same openness, and the same sense of community that Virtuopolis once provided. As we reflect on Virtuopolis's disappearance, we're reminded of just how fragile the digital world can be. The internet is constantly shifting, changing, and evolving, and what seems permanent one day can vanish the next. Virtuopolis didn't just disappear because of technical failures or server crashes. It vanished because of the shifting tides of the digital landscape, a landscape that now favors control over creativity. But perhaps it's in this very disappearance that we find the most important lesson of all. Nothing in the digital world is permanent, and that's both a blessing and a curse. The true power of Virtuopolis lies not in its physical existence, but in the ideas it inspired. And as long as we continue to look for those pieces, to keep searching for the spirit of what Virtuopolis represented, it will never truly be lost. The city may be gone, but the story continues, in the communities that still thrive, in the creative spaces we build, and in the memories of those who were once part of it. The mystery of Virtuopolis may never be fully solved, but its legacy will continue to shape the internet for years to come. At this point, we're left with a sense of both wonder and melancholy. Virtuopolis, the digital city that once captivated so many, has become both a legend and a cautionary tale. Its rise and fall were not just the story of a website, but a microcosm of the internet's early days, full of potential, unencumbered by corporate interests, and driven by the boundless creativity of its users. As time has gone on, we've witnessed the internet evolve into something far more controlled, commercialized, and algorithm-driven. But in those early days, Virtuopolis shone like a beacon of what the internet could have been. The fascinating part about Virtuopolis's disappearance is that it didn't just affect the users who were there at the time. It resonated with the entire digital culture. Many of us, even if we weren't members of that particular community, still feel the ripples of its loss. And as the digital world grows more commercial and structured, there's a part of us that continues to long for the days when the internet felt like a true frontier. Wild, open, and full of possibility. Today, the internet is an entirely different animal. It's become a platform for major corporations, advertisers, and influencers. While there's no shortage of creativity on the web, it's often constrained by algorithms and ad revenue. The spirit of collaboration and unbridled creativity that Virtuopolis represented is now harder to find. Yet when we look at the platforms that still allow for some measure of freedom, places like open source communities, independent forums, and smaller social networks, it's clear that the ideals of Virtuopolis have not been entirely lost. They live on, even if they're not as visible or accessible as they once were. The disappearance of Virtuopolis also highlights something that many of us tend to forget when we're consumed by the conveniences of today's internet. The very things we take for granted, the content we consume, the platforms we use, and the communities we engage with, are not as permanent as we believe. The fleeting nature of the internet, where one trend or platform can rise and fall in the blink of an eye, is something that's often overlooked. Virtuopolis serves as a stark reminder that nothing, Not even a digital city built by its users is safe from the tides of change. But as we look back at Virtuopolis, we also have to acknowledge its lasting impact. It left a mark on those who were part of it, a mark that can still be felt today. The idea of a free and open internet, where creativity and collaboration are the driving forces, still inspires those who were once part of Virtuopolis and even those who came after. The loss of the city may have been sudden, but its influence continues to echo throughout the digital world. One of the most enduring aspects of Virtuopolis was the community it fostered. Despite its eventual fragmentation and decline, the sense of belonging that users found there remains a powerful memory for those who were lucky enough to experience it. In a world where digital communities are often fleeting or toxic, Virtuopolis was a space that for a time felt like home, a place where people could come together, share their creativity, and forge genuine connections. That sense of connection, that sense of being part of something larger than oneself, is what continues to fuel the desire to find Virtuopolis again, even if we know it can never truly be restored. So what can we take from all of this? Perhaps it's that, even in the face of loss, the digital world still holds incredible potential. Yes, Virtuopolis is gone, but the spirit it embodied, creativity, freedom, community, is still very much alive. It lives on in the digital spaces that continue to grow and evolve, and in the minds of those who remember the early days of the internet as a place of boundless possibility. And maybe, just maybe, it's that very spirit that will drive the next great digital movement, the next Virtuopolis, one that can carry the lessons of the past into the future. In the end, Virtuopolis serves as both a warning and an inspiration. It warns us that the digital world can be fragile, that even the most vibrant communities can disappear overnight. But it also inspires us to keep building, keep creating, and keep searching for those open, unfiltered spaces where anything is possible. The story of Virtuopolis is not one of defeat, it's one of transformation. The city may have vanished, but its ideals live on in the communities that continue to shape the internet today. As we reflect on the tale of Virtuopolis, we find ourselves asking not what was lost, but what can be built in its place. The internet is still a canvas, still a space for creation, and the lessons of Virtuopolis remind us that, with the right mix of creativity and collaboration, we can carve out new spaces of freedom in an increasingly controlled digital world. As we draw closer to the final chapters of the Virtuopolis story, it's impossible not to acknowledge the lessons this digital city has imparted upon us. Virtuopolis wasn't just an isolated event. It was a turning point in the evolution of the internet itself. In its heyday, it was a place where the boundaries of creativity and collaboration were pushed to their limits. But it also exposed the inherent challenges of maintaining an open, user-driven space in a digital landscape that was rapidly evolving toward control, monetization, and structure. The spirit of Virtuopolis lives on in the digital underground, where small niche communities still thrive, often in the shadows of the larger, more commercialized platforms that dominate our everyday internet experience. These communities are the inheritors of the ideals Virtuopolis espoused, an internet built not for profit, but for connection. They are the digital descendants of the city that never fully died, yet will never return as it once was. Perhaps it's this duality, what was lost and what continues to survive, that makes Virtuopolis so profoundly impactful. If there's one takeaway from Virtuopolis, it's the importance of maintaining that balance between freedom and structure in digital spaces. The city's ultimate downfall wasn't just due to technical glitches or malicious actors. No, Virtuopolis fell because it lacked sustainable infrastructure. The more open a digital space is, the more it needs structure to keep it from falling apart. Virtuopolis was a city without a city hall, No centralized governance, no fail-safes, no clear plan for long-term maintenance. As Virtuopolis expanded, its infrastructure simply couldn't keep up with the creativity and chaos it had unleashed. It was a beautiful experiment, but without the right support systems in place, it became unsustainable. This is the lesson that many digital platforms today are beginning to understand. Whether it's through content moderation policies, community guidelines, or transparent leadership, the internet needs structure to maintain the creative and free spirit ethos that we all crave. Platforms like Reddit or independent projects that encourage creativity but provide structure to support that creativity have become more and more important. In the wake of Virtuopolis, we now understand that the internet can be both free and organized, both creative and controlled. It's the balance of these elements that will define the future of the digital world. Yet as much as we've learned, there's a part of us that longs for a Virtuopolis reborn, something that recalls the boundless optimism of the early web. Today's internet can feel like a marketplace more than a community, with algorithms, ads, and influencers shaping every experience. But like any good story, Virtuopolis serves as a reminder that the digital world can still be a place for unfiltered creativity, where people come together not for profit, but for the joy of sharing their ideas with the world. Perhaps that's why Virtuopolis continues to haunt the corners of the internet, a quiet whisper reminding us of what we once had, and what we still have the potential to rebuild. And yet, the beauty of Virtuopolis was that it wasn't perfect. Its imperfections were part of its charm. The city wasn't built to last forever. It was an experiment, a brief moment in time that demonstrated the possibilities of an open, user-driven internet. It wasn't bound by the rules of conventional digital spaces, and that's what made it special. It was flawed, chaotic, and full of strange quirks, but it was also a space where people could make their own rules and build something unique. Perhaps the real beauty of Virtuopolis lies not in its creation or its downfall, but in the fact that it remains a part of the digital landscape today. It's a story that continues to be told, its legacy passed down through the stories of those who lived within it. Even though the city no longer exists, its ideals continue to shape the way we think about digital spaces and the way we engage with one another online. The story of Virtuopolis might have ended, but the conversation it sparked is far from over. Now, as the digital world continues to evolve, we find ourselves at a crossroads. We've come so far since the days of Virtuopolis, but the lessons it taught us are still as relevant as ever. Can we preserve the spirit of Virtuopolis in an age of commercialization and corporate control? Can we reclaim the internet as a space for creativity, collaboration, and freedom? The future of the internet depends on the answers to these questions, and perhaps Virtuopolis holds the key to unlocking them. As we move forward, let's not forget the lessons of the past. Virtuopolis may have been lost, but the idea of it, the essence of what it represented, will never disappear. It will live on in the communities that continue to thrive in the shadows, in the creators who push the boundaries of what's possible, and in the dream that one day the internet can again be a place of limitless potential. The city may be gone, but its spirit remains, a quiet whisper in the vast expanse of the digital world. As we approach the final moments of this exploration, it's becoming clear that the disappearance of Virtuopolis wasn't simply a loss. It was a transformative event, one that rippled through the very fabric of the internet. It wasn't just about one community or one website. It was about the larger changes taking place in the digital world at the time. Virtuopolis was part of a broader shift, a moment when the internet began to move from the chaotic, untamed wilderness of the early days to something more structured, commercialized, and regulated. Its loss serves as a marker of that transition, a reminder of a time when the internet was still a frontier, still an open space for exploration and experimentation. But even in the face of this loss, there's hope. Virtuopolis wasn't just a casualty of digital evolution, it was a blueprint. Its ideals live on in some ways more powerful than ever. As we see new forms of digital communities rise, from decentralized platforms to grassroots online movements, it becomes clear that the spirit of Virtuopolis isn't as lost as we might have thought. In fact, it may be more relevant today than ever before. Think about the shift towards decentralization we're seeing in the tech world today. The rise of blockchain technology, the push for decentralized social media platforms, and the growing interest in self-hosted digital spaces are all signs that there's a hunger for the kind of freedom and creativity that Virtuopolis once embodied. We're beginning to see a new wave of online communities that prioritize user autonomy over corporate control. These digital spaces are not governed by profit-driven motives or controlled by algorithms, but by the people who inhabit them. Virtuopolis may have disappeared, but the ideals it represented, freedom, creativity, and collaboration, are still alive and well, evolving with the times. Of course, it's not all smooth sailing. Building open, decentralized spaces on the internet is no easy task. As we've seen with Virtuopolis, the larger a digital space grows, the more difficult it becomes to maintain. The very freedom that makes these spaces special also makes them vulnerable to chaos. Virtuopolis was a reminder of the challenges that come with creating something truly open and free on the internet. It was an experiment that succeeded in many ways, but ultimately failed because it couldn't sustain itself. Yet rather than seeing this as a failure, we can view it as a lesson that teaches us how to build better, more resilient digital communities in the future. As we look to the future of the internet, we must ask ourselves, what do we want it to be? Do we want to continue down the path of commercialization and centralization, where the internet is a marketplace, a space for advertising, content creation, and algorithm-driven engagement? Or do we want to return to the ideals of Virtuopolis, where the internet is a place for creativity, collaboration, and community? The truth is, we may never fully return to the early days of the internet, and perhaps we shouldn't try. But that doesn't mean we can't draw inspiration from the past and work toward creating a digital world that embodies the best aspects of Virtuopolis, a space where anyone can create, share, and connect without being constrained by the rules of the commercial internet. It's a lofty goal, but one worth striving for. The disappearance of Virtuopolis was a moment of loss, but it was also a moment of transformation. It marked the end of one chapter in the history of the internet, but it also laid the groundwork for the next chapter, one where the ideals of Virtuopolis can live on in new forms. As we continue to build the digital world of tomorrow, let's remember what made Virtuopolis so special: its commitment to freedom, creativity, and community. These are the values that should guide us as we work to create a better, more open internet for the future. The legacy of Virtuopolis may not be something we can fully recreate, but it's something we can certainly draw inspiration from. The story of the city that once was, and the digital ideals it represented, will continue to shape the internet for years to come. It's up to us to take what Virtuopolis taught us and use it to build the digital world we want to see. And maybe, just maybe, in doing so, we'll create something that's even better than the city that once was. As we close tonight's journey, remember, the spirit of Virtuopolis isn't gone. It's still out there waiting to be rediscovered. In the far corners of the internet, in the communities that still value creativity and freedom, Virtuopolis lives on. And as long as we continue to search for it, to build spaces like it, its story will never truly be over. As we come to the final chapter of this journey through Virtuopolis, There's an undeniable sense of bittersweetness in the air. The digital city that once captured the imagination of so many is no longer with us, but its legacy lives on in ways we may not always recognize. We've learned that the internet is not static. It's a constantly evolving space where communities rise and fall, and digital landscapes shift with the tide of technology, commerce, and user needs. Virtuopolis may have been one of the first to fade into the digital ether, but it was also one of the first to show us just how fragile our online creations can be. It's impossible to deny the impact that Virtuopolis had on the early web. It was a blueprint for what the internet could be, a place of limitless possibility where anyone could contribute, create, and thrive. It showed us the power of open source collaboration, where users weren't just passive observers, but active architects of the spaces they inhabited. For a brief shining moment, Virtuopolis was the ideal digital utopia, unpoliced, creative, and alive with potential. Yet despite its apparent success, Virtuopolis was also a warning. The city's rapid rise and equally swift fall showed us how difficult it is to maintain the ideals of openness and freedom in an increasingly corporate-driven digital world. As the internet grew, so too did the forces that sought to control and commodify it. Virtuopolis couldn't withstand the pressure. It was a victim of its own idealism. The very thing that made it so unique, its openness, its user-driven nature, was also what caused it to falter when it couldn't scale properly or maintain cohesion. But the lesson isn't all about failure. It's about resilience. In the wake of Virtuopolis, we've seen other spaces emerge that try to capture that same spirit. Open source projects, decentralized platforms, and independent forums continue to thrive, albeit in a more fragmented form. They carry the torch of Virtuopolis, keeping alive the ideals of creativity and freedom that defined the lost city. These communities may not be as large or as centralized as Virtuopolis, but they are proof that the hunger for a free and open internet has not been extinguished. The disappearance of Virtuopolis also begs us to reflect on the direction the internet has taken in the years since. The corporate internet we navigate today, where content is often created for the purpose of engagement, clicks, and revenue, presents a very different landscape from the one that birthed Virtuopolis. In many ways, the internet of today is more like a controlled environment, where what we see and do is constantly shaped by algorithms and corporate interests. Virtuopolis was a brief moment when the internet was still wild, untamed, and full of possibility. It was an experiment in the purest sense of the word, one that ended too soon but left behind valuable lessons. And perhaps, as we look toward the future, the story of Virtuopolis is a call to action. Can we reclaim the ideals of that lost city in today's internet? Can we build digital spaces that foster creativity, collaboration, and openness without succumbing to the pressures of commercialization? Virtuopolis may have vanished, but the need for such spaces remains, and it's up to us to continue the work that was started so many years ago. The digital world is still in its adolescence, and while we may not be able to recreate Virtuopolis in its original form, we can certainly build new spaces that carry forward its legacy. In many ways, this is the true power of Virtuopolis's story. It reminds us that the internet is not just a tool, but a living, breathing space. It's a space that can be shaped by the people who use it. It can be a place for creativity, for freedom, and for connection, but it requires effort, vision, and care. As we continue to navigate the complexities of the modern internet, we must remember the lessons that Virtuopolis left behind. That open, user-driven spaces are not only possible, they are vital. As we end this journey, let's remember that the story of Virtuopolis is not just one of loss, it's one of transformation. The city may be gone, but its ideals continue to inspire. The digital world is constantly evolving, but as long as we hold on to the spirit of Virtuopolis, it will never truly be lost. It lives on in the open source projects we contribute to, the forums we join, and the online communities we help build. Virtuopolis may have disappeared, but it will always be part of the larger story of the internet. A story that's still being written every day by the people who create and shape it. So, as we close tonight's journey, we may not know what happened to Virtuopolis, but we know that its story is far from over. In the shadows of the internet, in the small, vibrant communities that still exist outside the corporate spotlight, the spirit of Virtuopolis lives on. And perhaps in the future, we will look back and find that it was never really gone at all. It was simply waiting for the right moment to rise again.